There it goes. And we're going live. So,
Hey
hello.
everyone. Hello world. Okay, Kathleen, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead and check, because that way I can check and see what's going on with everything.
Okay. For anyone who's out there, everybody, welcome to the BA Zone's live pre-show. Tonight we're going to be talking about success secrets for the business analysts. And we're going to be talking about grammar and how important grammar is in communication, great communication. Um, Last week we did talk about vocabulary. So if you didn't catch that show, you can catch it on YouTube and all the favorite spots. And we're just getting ready, going through our checklist here, getting ready for tonight's show. I'm in my new digs because I was thrown out of the living room for obvious reasons. You can't have company over and say, you all got to go because I've got to do the live show. So I've sort of
Sure you
come
can.
up
I
in
do it all
here
the
into
time.
my, I know you do it all the time. But, downstairs we were hearing the dog's little paws upstairs, and I thought it was like static or something wrong with our sound. And it turns out it was just Tinker roaming around upstairs looking desperately for me. So I've moved up into my writing office, up into my office here. And hopefully this can be a setup that just sort of stays here, unless we have company staying over, because it's also the guest room. So they'll just have to deal with our show if they
That's
stay
right.
over.
Hey, they can be a guest.
They can be, that's right, it's a guest. You're
Put a little
invited
chair
to
next to
stay,
you. They
but
be all set.
that, that's
They can
right.
be the
Don't
official Tink
complain.
holder during the show. They can hold Tink up through the whole show.
That's right.
He'd
That's
love it.
right. Oh, he would love it. We were just talking about if anybody has a dog. I mean, poor little Tinker seems to be losing his eyesight. I was just talking about this to Kathleen, and he seems to be losing his eyesight rapidly, and I think it's cataracts. And he takes prednisone for his other issues that he's got going on, and all of a sudden he seems to be losing his vision very rapidly. So we have to take him to a doggy ophthalmologist and see what's going on there. But in the meantime, I said I have to get him a little crash helmet because the poor thing just keeps bumping into things like I do after 3 martinis. So, I know he's not gotten into the booze. So we're kind of like concerned about what's going on. So the poor
Are
little
you
thing, he doesn't even
really,
come up.
really sure?
Well, no, he sort of has that olive grin occasionally. So I'm not quite sure. But poor thing, it's like I'm carrying him up and down the stairs now because he's really having, and I just like humans, you start to lose your vision. It gets very frightening. Um, but Kathleen assures me I can hang little cotton balls with lavender scents so he can follow the scent
Walk
trail.
away. It worked really well for Bailey, but she had more of a progression. So, I started to do it when we noticed
Right.
she was losing her sight. So I was able to do it over time. So her brain was already programmed that, my favorite pea area has the mint smell, and the door has the lemongrass, and the stairs had lavender. And so she was already pretty oriented. It's happening so fast with him. And it's going to be harder for him to learn. I mean, he will learn, but it'll just take him a little longer, I think.
Exactly. He will learn if he doesn't eat the cotton balls because that's the other
Well,
issue. The boy eats just everything that's available. Not so much now that he's gained some weight back from when we adopted him, but yeah, it's sort of been a challenge. Talk about communication. Woo! Talk about your nonverbal communication that you have to
Well, that's
address.
the other thing. I was thinking about
Um,
that after we talked last time, because that was the other thing that I started to do with her was on walks and everything. I would start to say, curb down, curb up. There's a trash can in your way. So it's because after a while, that's what she relied on, because she was still walking like she could see, but I knew she couldn't, so I had to give her those clues so she didn't walk into
yeah,
anything. It makes the walks
yeah.
way more intense for you because you're not only watching where you're going, but you're also having to keep telling the dog what's coming up.
Oh, I know, I know.
But
Love
it
her to
becomes
death.
second
Love him to
nature.
death, I should say.
I mean, after I lost
Yeah,
her,
we'll do anything for our pets. They're
yeah,
like family, so they are
I,
family. So,
I'd go for walks with Ruby
so
and Stacy across the street. Ruby's the dog, Stacy's the person. And I would just start doing it because I was so used to it. When I'm out on a walk with a dog, you just start doing that. Ruby'd be like, shut up. She didn't need any help. She knew what was going on.
oh my goodness, poor things. Hey, if you're just joining us, this is the BA Zone Live. We're just doing our pre-show checklist and making sure we're up and running. We seem to be okay for right now. And we're going to be get going in here in about 2 minutes, I guess. And tonight we're going to be talking about grammar and the importance of communication overall, as far as a business analyst. I have to make sure I keep looking down. I'm sorry because I'm making sure that I'm not kicking my camera out of the way because it's a new environment for me. So I was relegated to my upstairs, and I'm just getting used to the new digs. Sorry.
I'll see.
I
And we're
will be
talking about
looking down
communicating with the
periodically.
dogs. Is it losing sight? All communication on different
It's all
levels.
communication, good,
Okay.
bad. I mean, communication is key. We can see that everywhere in today's world. It is definitely key. Oh, look
Just
at that!
testing
You
the
can catch us in all
screens.
those places.
Yeah. So
Checking the
should I
screen.
bring? I can bring that up. Hang on. Yes. So if you are settling in to join us this evening, we thank you. Thank you. And you can follow us in all of these various places. We try to be available in all the places you like to be. And by all means, if you think that there's anybody in your world that would find this content helpful, interesting, or if you just want somebody to talk to about afterward, invite them along. We've still got plenty of time. You can share, you can invite, all those kind of good things. And also remember to like and follow us so that way you get notified about when we go live.
There you go. I think as business analysts, we're talking about grammar. We've been talking about vocabulary and grammar and the importance of communication. And I think a lot of times as business analysts, we all focus on the technical tools and all of the ways that, we can get things done more efficiently. And communication is like really the crux of our entire career, is being able to elicit that information and communicate that information between different parties and interpret it. So I think it's important that we get down some of these basic skills. And, Kathleen and I do this on a regular basis. And we take in people's information and we take a look at it from a grammar perspective, especially if English is difficult to begin with, and God bless anyone who can figure out how to speak English, because there are so many different meanings to so many different words and phrases. But if English is your second language, it becomes that more important if you're dealing with English speaking folks. If you're not, that's okay. But just giving yourself a broader basis of the ability to communicate with different people is only going to help your career in the end, and help you get a better job, and put you in front of clients as opposed to being in the back research area. So it's all good. It's all helps.
Okay, and it's time for us to do the official show start. So, deep
Yay!
breath. All right, let me bring up the title and then we can do our thing. All right, hello everyone. Thanks so much for coming by tonight. You are at the BA Zone, where tonight we're going to talk about another business analyst secret. In this case, this is clear communication through grammar. So welcome, welcome. As you can see, Marianne is still back before she leaves us on her vacation. But in the meantime, we're going to make the most of our time with her. So welcome. Hope everybody's having a good day and you are ready to dive in. We remind you that you can like and or follow us depending on which platform you're on, and that way you will get notified about when we're going live. Also, please feel free to share, like, hearts, and all those good things, so that everybody knows where to come find us, because, hey, sharing is a good way to show the love. All right, so are we ready to dive in, Mare?
We are. And for anyone who doesn't know us or hasn't been here before, I'm Marianne Morrison, and
I am
my
Kathleen Sinnott.
there you go, co-founders of the BA Zone. So let's get right into it, Kathleen. So you want to start us off?
Sure. So, what we're going to talk about this month is clear communication, because let's face it, that's really critical to everything we do. In order for our projects to be successful, we have to be able to communicate with everyone at all the different levels, whatever their focus is. We have to make sure that we're speaking to them in a language that they understand. And a big part about that is making sure that your grammar is clear, especially when you're doing emails. If you're just firing off a text message to somebody at work, or if you're writing documents that are going to be read by people that maybe you're never going to meet in person. Maybe they're across the world, maybe they're just across the building and you're not allowed to talk to them. Whatever the reason, we rely on written communications very, a lot, and we need to make sure that what we are writing is clear, concise, efficient, and we do everything we possibly can to avoid misunderstandings. So tonight we're going to start talking about avoiding the common grammar mistakes that can kill your credibility as a writer communicator and can also cause unneeded confusion in your project. You might think that grammar is an annoying technicality, a minuscule detail of speech and writing that, teachers like to pound into your head, but it's not really worth the effort. But what you say and how you say it is absolutely critical, especially in a professional environment. So we're going to run through some of our favorite stumbling blocks that people run into, and hopefully help you avoid those in the future.
And some of our pet peeves as well.
Oh, yes. All right, so you want to do the definition, Mare? Okay, I'll do it. So, grammar refers to, here we go. So, grammar refers to the collection of principles defining how to put a sentence together. So, it's about, the order of the words, the punctuation, the verb tenses, the verb-subject agreement, all those kind of good things. Okay. So, let's start with one of our favorites. You want to take this one, Mare, or you want me to?
No, go ahead. I don't think you could hear me before because I started to talk over you. So, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So, missing or misplaced apostrophes. This is one that comes up quite a lot for people. There's a lot of confusion about it, but we're going to try to clear up some of that for you. So, let us take a look. Actually, we can go side by side because we can just talk about this. So, for example, when you're doing contractions, which are two words that get pushed together as sort of a shorthand, so the difference between cannot and can't, or I will and I'll, let us and let's, you always want to make sure that you're using the apostrophe in those, because that's indicating to your reader that that there's letters missing and that you're combining these words together. There's the other side of the coin, which is the see? Not too much coffee or not enough, I'm not sure. Possessive pronouns, including hers, ours, its, those, while they are possessive, where you would normally think you'd need the apostrophe, you actually are not supposed to use it. And using it would be absolutely incorrect. So, for example, if you're doing its, its, that's the possessive. If you do it apostrophe s, that's the contraction of it is. And that is, just dive right into it. One of my pet peeves is people constantly confuse those two. And the way to check yourself is to read it out loud and see if you could replace that version of its with it is, then you need the comma. If it doesn't fit, if you use that difference, then you don't need it. And things like plural nouns, that's another place where a lot of people will mistakenly use the apostrophe. So, for example, if you're going to write something about purchase, your show tickets here, tickets does not get the comma. Whereas suppose you say, okay, well, my brain just went. If you're going to say that these are, Susie's tickets, then they would get the apostrophe. I got that right? My brain
you did get that right.
Up. Okay, good. Thank you. Another one of my all-time favorites is your versus your. So Y-O-U-R versus Y-O-U apostrophe R-E. So in the case of Y-O-U-R, you're saying something like, how's your project going? Okay? Whereas if you're saying something like, you really should take this over. My brain's just locked up. If you're going for something where you're trying to say you are, so like, you are doing a great job.
So where are you going? Like where are you going? Yeah. See, even for us, it locks up.
Well, it's hard.
Yeah, those little.
It's one of these things that's actually harder for me to explain than to do.
It
because
is.
it's so automatic in my brain. So when I have to step back and actually explain to somebody, I'm like, well, how do I explain this so it's clear? Because in my brain, it's like, well, duh, but that's not duh.
I
It's,
know.
you know, it's the kind of thing that you have to get into a rhythm with. And the longer you've done it the wrong way, the harder it is to undo it. So that's why my brain keeps going, why are you saying it the wrong way?
I know. I know. It is difficult.
It is. So I'm going to try that one again.
Um,
So your versus
you
your
are.
apostrophe. So it's the difference between this is yours, as in, you know, it belongs to you, or you're doing something, as opposed to you are something. So you are
Right. So
fast, you are
yours,
great. That would get the
right.
apostrophe.
So yours is more of the possessive. It's yours type of thing, and you are is more of a verb. It's sort of like sort of combining the two to shorten it. You're doing something.
Right. So it's
You
another
are
example
doing
of the
something.
contraction kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
See? It's not so easy. Don't feel bad.
See, like I said, English language very complicated.
Yes, especially after a long day. Okay, so I think we've got that one beaten to death. Let's move on. Just,
I'd like to.
whoop.
There are other things too, besides conjunctions and the you and the you are. When you're writing documentation, uh, especially when documentation requirements are supposed to be really clear and concise. Another rule is to remove any words that are sort of modifiers that are very general. So you don't want to be saying things such as really, truly, genuinely, very, because they're sort of generic modifiers and they're not measurable. And a lot of times when we're talking about business requirements or business rules, we want to avoid any kind of modifiers that are vague. And a lot of times people will give you, for example, a business rule that says, you know, really or truly or genuinely, or maybe we just want, I need to have a lot of something. A lot is not a measurable term. So these type of modifiers that are very vague, like somewhat or seemingly, essentially, fairly, or rather, you want to try to avoid those types of words. So you're sort of self-editing yourself. You can do a document and do sort of, your initial document, and then you want to go back and re-edit and revise when you're talking about grammar, and really look for these things that we're talking about. Kathleen was talking about with the possessive or these vague words. So, you can modify words and say something like, you see a little white church as you're coming down the hill. Well, something like that sounds like the little white church is literally walking down the hill. So you got to be really careful about how you use these words. But the bigger issue is the modifiers and the vagueness. You want to try to avoid that. So, as you're doing your document, go through, do a draft, and then do these self-editing grammar things that we're going through. And that will really make you come across as what you're talking about. And you do know what you're talking about, but sometimes very difficult to convey that thought. And with that, we'll go down to the next rule.
Okay, so next up is misplaced or missing commas. This one we're going to have a little fun with too, but let's first
Yes.
talk a
Well,
little bit
they've
about.
changed it. They've honestly changed it over the years, and years ago it was one way, then they changed it. Now they've changed it back for legal reasons. And Kathleen and I have this conversation all the time. So you'll find it humorous. And it's very important actually for legal reasons. So Kathleen, I'll let you take that.
Yeah, I'm just going
Take
to head
that
over.
over.
So I'm going to head over a couple of general rules, and then we're going to go to our favorite. So in
Right.
general, you're going to want to use commas. You know, whenever you're trying to maybe put together two verbs in a compound sentence. If you're trying to join together two independent clauses, you're generally going to use them. You're going to use them after an introductory phrase. So if you're going to say something like, grabbing her umbrella, comma, Kate raced out of the house. Okay, without the comma there, the sentence runs a little bit too hard. You also are going to use them when you're going to do a comparison. So if you're going to say, for example, this box is lighter than that box, it would be this box, comma, is lighter than that box. But the one that we really like is what's commonly known as the Oxford comma, which is there basically to clarify things. Most people think about it in terms of a series of three. So you're going to say apples, oranges, and pears. You will run into people who will argue that the comma before the and is not important. But we're going to show you some examples of why it is important. And it doesn't just apply to cases where it's a series of three. So just give me 1 second, and I will bring up some lovely examples.
So while she's bringing that up, years ago, very many years ago, I had gone to a school that we did a lot of business writing in the classes. And literally they would say something like, if you had exactly what Kathleen was talking about, apples, oranges and cherries. So you'd have apples, comma, cherries, comma, and then, you'd have apples, comma, cherries, and there'd be no comma between the cherries and the oranges or whatever it was. And they were saying that was sort of redundant. You didn't need the comma because you had the and. And then as years passed, there were a lot of legal issues with that. And Kathleen's going to bring up an example of that. But literally, that's the way they taught you to do it. It used to be commas before everything, even an and. And then for a while there, they were like, yeah, you know what? You don't really need that comma before the and. And then they realized, oh, but you do need that comma. And, we have a few legal folks that get on our classes, and they probably know exactly what we're talking about. And Kathleen has that example. Do you have that up yet, Kath?
Well, I have the fun visual ones, but I just brought it up. So a very recent case, I'm looking to see what the date was on this. So last March, there was a case in Maine where a group of dairy drivers, folks who were delivering the dairy products, were arguing in court that they deserved overtime, and of course their company said they did not. And the short version of this is the drivers won, and they won because of lack of an Oxford comma. So let me see if I can find the sentence here. So, okay, the sentence that they won off of is the rules about what would qualify for overtime pay involved anything that, okay, so the canning, processing, preserving, freezing, drying, marketing, storing, packaging for shipment, or distribution of, and then it lists the items out. That last part of it, the packaging for shipment or distribution of, did not have the Oxford comma in it. And because of that, their lawyers were able to argue that what they were doing fell under the packaging for shipment or distribution because they were the drivers, which meant that they were qualified for overtime, which meant that the company lost a lot of money because of one comma. They weren't happy, but I was happy for the drivers.
Yeah, exactly. So Kathleen, just
for a minute, I'll try to bring it up so you can see it.
So Kathleen, just to qualify, when we're talking about this Oxford comma, we're talking about that comma in a series of, black, blue, orange, comma, and white, or white. So it's that comma before the and, the conjunction before the and or the or. What other ones are there, Kathleen? It's mainly the and the or, correct?
Well, the and and the or is the example most people refer to. We'll get to the other example because it's one of my favorites, but I think you need the visual for it. But hang on 1 second. Let me bring up the example here. Hopefully, let me see if I can make that a little bit bigger. Oh, yes, because I really want ads right now. Thank you. 1 sec. Okay, so this is the part here. So basically, the company was saying that because the drivers were not involved in the canning, processing, preserving, hang on, it's the other way around. So this is what the law says about activities that do not merit overtime pay. Okay, so all these things that were here in the beginning, this is the sentence where the comma was missing. So because there was no comma between packaging for shipment or distribution, that's what made them win their case. I don't know if it says, one of the articles actually said that how much they won. I don't know that this one does. Probably not.
But it just goes to show you how important a comma can be especially when we're talking legally for companies. Um, you know, it is super important. And we talk about this all the times, even in calculations. If you have calculations that a programmer has to logically program, you want to make sure you have that comment in there so someone's not thinking it's sort of it is connected in some way. You need that comma for that list. Excuse me. Um, the all important Oxford comma that has gone back and forth. It's one of the, if you don't remember anything else, remember the Oxford comma because it can save your company millions of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, it really did. And even the person who wrote this article, at the very end of it, it says, for all you Oxford comma purists out there, go ahead and gloat.
Right. And something else too that can get you, it can be a legal issue too and get you into a lot of problems.
Which is not so
Another
funny.
rule, excuse me?
Which is not so funny.
Which is not so funny, no, is to avoid when you're creating sentences to avoid sexism in the questions. So in general,
Okay, well, hang
when
on. I want to show a couple more examples before you go there.
okay, go ahead.
Because I want to just really drive
I
this
don't know if
home.
you're ready yet.
Oh, yeah. No, we've got them all lined up here. All right, let me pick this up.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so this is another favorite of mine. So, because there are people who think that the solution to the Oxford comma argument is to just not use commas at all. So this was an actual article, an actual cover for a magazine. Okay, that was I don't know if you know Rachel Ray, but she's a chef, I guess we would call her, and she's got all kinds of products and everything, and she has a whole line of animal products and foods and accessories and all that kind of stuff. And the way that this is written implies that Rachel Ray finds inspiration in cooking her family and her dog.
Yummy.
Okay. Yeah, so the way this is written, it sounds like those are her food sources, as opposed to these are three things that she gets inspiration from. It should have been cooking, comma, her family, comma, and her dog.
There are some family members you may want to cook, not necessarily eat. You may want to cook them, but probably not when you're in advertising. Probably not a good thing.
So here's another one where the intention changes dramatically, whether you're using it or not. So if you write out, well done steak, you would get a steak that is cooked to your liking. But if you say well done, comma, steak on your food order, you're saying that the steak did an awesome job.
Yay, go steak, go steak.
And I know that these are silly examples, but I find that humor helps the idea really cement in your brain.
That's right. All you chickens and pork, take notice. It's a well done steak.
So this is a nicer version of one that's very popular. I didn't want to go with the popular one because I didn't know if somebody would get offended. But this was, we invited the rhinoceri, Washington, and Lincoln as three separate entities, as opposed to we invited the rhinoceri, who are named Washington and Lincoln. This is one of my favorites. I actually had this on my desk for quite a while. Why I still use the Oxford comma. I had eggs, toast, and orange juice as three separate things. If you remove that last comma, you have eggs and toast that has orange juice on it. A little too soggy for me.
Yeah, I kind of like dip in eggs, but not dip in orange juice.
Yeah, no, that does not work. This one cracks me up. So the way that this is presented to you, it implies that, first of all, it's okay for hunters to go hunting pedestrians. Just make sure that while you're on the trails hunting them, that you use a little caution. Obviously, there's a very important comma missing in this one.
Oh, my goodness.
And this is my favorite one. This is the one I wanted to say for last. So this is why, people always talk about it being all about, the series, apples, oranges, and pears, and so on and so forth. But it's not just, because there's a world of difference between let's eat grandma as opposed to let's, eat grandma. In the first one, we're suggesting grandma as a food source. In the second one, we're asking grandma if she would make our favorite dish. These are very different things.
This is true. Cultures have changed. You used to be able to eat grandma. Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Okay, so those are my favorites. I wanted to make sure that those were in there because I enjoyed those.
Thank you, Kathleen. That's fantastic. So as I was saying before, we were so highly entertained by all those by all those screw ups. Thank you. You want to avoid sexism if you can, and it happens all the time, and everybody does it. So again, when you're self-editing your documents, um, when the gender of a subject is unspecified, you want to avoid defaulting to the masculine, which people do all the time. And I'll give you an example here. You know, a physician enters his assessment of the patient. Well, we all know physicians can be male or female. So you want to try to avoid that by either saying the physician enters the assessment of the patient, or you can say the physician enters his slash her assessment of the patient. So that's just sort of avoiding that whole issue of, is it a he, is it a she, you know, they, or from somewhere else. So, you know, just try to avoid automatically defaulting to the masculine. And, you know, everybody sort of does it, but we want to try to avoid that, because when you're dealing with users and trying to get sign off, it can become an issue. It can become a little bit of a prickly pear when folks see the masculine or the feminine, whichever one you happen to default to all the time. So that's just another thing to avoid that sexism in your documentation. Carry on.
Okay.
I'm just throwing in tidbits as we go along here.
Keeps the conversation rolling, and by all means,
Keeps it, yeah, keeps it. Doesn't, it's not so just all about grammar. It's sort of, you know,
well,
fun
grammar
stuff.
kind of covers a large area, so
A large
a lot of people
area.
are like, it's just these things, but it does kind of wander into the other areas, because it's also about, the subject and verb and the word choice and all that kind of stuff too. And by all means, yeah, you folks who are out there, if you have your own favorites or if you have questions or comments, feel free to throw them in. Don't be shy, just because we're all having a good time, the two of us here. We want you to be a part of the conversation too, so don't be shy. And if you're catching this on a replay, and you have something that you want to contribute, by all means, go ahead. We do come back and we check every show to respond to any comments that come in after we do the live, so don't be shy. Okay, let me switch back here, and we can move on to my next favorite. Okay, here we go. So, next up on our hit list is frequently confused and misused words. Now, we'll both have fun with this one. Do you have one you want to start off with, or you want me to dive in?
No, go ahead, and I'll come up with.
Okay. All right, so the one that I see probably most often is affect versus effect. Okay, affect, A-F-F-E-C-T, is a verb. That means to influence. Effect is usually used as a noun, and that means an event, condition, state of affairs, that type of thing. People are constantly switching the two of those back and forth, and it is the kind of thing that when you use it right, people notice, and they're, to be honest, a little impressed.
And I have one too, and it's more around the use of was and were. So, when you're doing some of the really common mistakes is that subjects and verbs are supposed to agree with the number and the person type of thing. So what I mean by that is if you have, like, if you say a sentence like a limousine as well as a driver was hired for the prom, not were hired for the prom, because they assume that the limousine and the driver, you're still talking about one thing. You know what I'm saying? So it's was, as opposed to a limousine and a driver were hired. When you put an and in there, then you have to use the were. And this gets really complicated, but a limousine and a driver. So as well as a driver is sort of implying that it's still just one type of thing. But when you say a limousine and a driver, when you use and, then you have to say were hired for the prom. And then it gets even more complicated, because if the two subjects refer to the same person or thing, then you use the was. So, for example, my friend and confidant, they're still one thing. They're not two separate things. You have to use the was and not the were. So it's that was and were, and every time you use it, when to use it. But again, if it's a one person thing, you're going to use was as opposed to a were type of statement. So there are kind of exceptions to that when you're, and we can talk about that with it's and there and everything, but was and were was a big one with me. When to use, it's like who and whom. And I'm sure you've had issues with who and whom as well, but you go with the singular when you're talking about a singular subject, as opposed to more than one, and then you got to use the were. That makes sense?
Totally. We're getting into a rhythm.
Totally. It's totally boring, but it totally makes sense.
Well, see, for word nerds,
really seriously, you got to be drinking when you do this stuff.
All right, well, let's hit another popular one that you're going to see. There, and there. Talk about English being confusing. So
oh my gosh.
There, as in THEIR, is a possessive pronoun, and that means that they own something. They possess it. THERE is a location. THEY apostrophe RE, there's our apostrophe again, is the abbreviated form of they are. So it's the contraction of they are. So if you're going to be talking about somebody owning something, the ownership, possession of something, it's either THEIR or THEY apostrophe RE. But if you're talking about going to a place, you want to use THERE. Sounds simple, but you'll find people tripping up on that one all the time.
This is true. And if you want to go a little deeper on the there, the THEIR, you can also refer to its, ITS, getting a little more complicated. So for example, the baseball team won its first home game versus their home game. And this is because when you're looking at the context of a sentence, a team is considered a singular, even though it's made up of multiple people. It's considered singular. So it would be its home game as opposed to the possessive their home game, just to complicate matters.
Right. Because why should it be easy? Then we couldn't.
Why should it be easy?
Okay, another trio here is two versus two versus two. So, TO is typically used before a noun or a verb, and it describes the destination, recipient, or action. So, my friend drove me to the doctor's appointment. I sent the files to my boss. Okay, TOO, on the other hand, is a word that's used as an alternative to also or as well, and it's used to describe an adjective in extreme. So, for example, you're going to say something like, we both think it's too cold outside, as in it's too much. The other one is TWO, which unfortunately some people use as either one of those, but really that's just the number two. But some people just fall into a habit of just throwing that in there because that's the way that they're hearing the word, whereas that is a completely different animal. But it's just something to keep an eye out for, because when you're rushing, it's the kind of thing that's liable to happen. Got any more favorites, Mare?
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because sometimes the brain synapses don't work, but I believe the word allot, A-L-O-T, doesn't really exist, right? Is it a lot? Or which word is it now? I think it's that one, isn't it?
I think so.
A lot?
Yeah, so a lot, as one word, is the common misspelling of the word a, followed by the word lot with a space in between.
Right. Yeah. So that's a big one we see, a lot. We see that a lot.
Yes, we do. Alrighty. Shall we move on? Or do you have another one?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Nope, that's...
Alrighty. Another favorite, the passive voice. So, this is just another one on the list of things that you really shouldn't do. Don't be passive. Passive is not a good thing, right? So, a passive sentence is when the object of the sentence gets promoted to the subject position. Basically, it's the opposite of the active voice. Okay, so it's the difference between the letter was mailed by me, blah, or I mailed the letter. That's probably the simplest example of what not to do and what to do. Any other you want to throw in on that?
Always, No, I just to say, always go with the active voice. And this becomes really important when you get to requirements. And later on, when people say, I didn't agree to that, you really want to have the active voice and say that, the subject matter expert, declared this, or, said, not that, they sort of said, okay, kind of thing. That passive voice does not work when it comes to requirements. You definitely have to have a clear, concise, so you can say, look, this is what you had said. If that's not what you meant, that's fine. But this is what you had said, and this is what we had agreed to. So you don't want to write passive. You don't want to write passive sentences. You want to make sure that they are statements and declarations of exactly what was said. The passive voice leaves too much wiggle room for a lot of folks. So you definitely want to make sure that you're doing the active voice as opposed to passive. We've run into a lot of that.
People tend to do it because they think it sounds more formal or professional, but it's actually the opposite. It kind of makes you sound weak and wimpy. If you're going to say something, say it declaratively, say it with conviction, and say it in the most efficient manner possible.
Mm-hmm. Unless you're trying to be wishy-washy.
Yeah.
And don't let them be wishy-washy.
No, that would be a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anything else on that one, or are we ready to start the wrap up on why this is important?
Wrap it up, sister.
Okay, so why is this important? So there's a lot of different reasons why this is important, so we're just going to run over some of the big ones here. I actually found a study by the Harvard Business Review that listed out a few things that they saw over years of tracking people in their profession. And on the grammar side of things, the people that they followed over 10 years of their career who tended to make fewer grammar errors ended up getting more promotions over their career. Another one that they found was that the folks with better grammar were able to make job changes that were their choice, not the company's choice. So basically saying that they were seen as being successful and they had more opportunities in front of them, which also led them to achieving higher positions. Let's bring Mare back here. Whoops, get my name off of there. So another reason for making sure that you're paying close attention to your grammar, in addition to clarity, which is just key to everything that we're doing, but it also it indicates to people that you are paying very close attention to details. And let's face it, in our job, that's very, very important. It also implies that you are someone who is very good at critical thinking. It's something that also came out of the study, that the people who were very good at grammar also tended to be very good critical thinkers. And it also implies a certain level of intellect and education. Now that doesn't mean that it's not so much about the school you went to. It's more about what you've learned and how you continue to learn in your career. So those are some of the extra benefits that come along with paying attention to your grammar. Anything you want to toss in there, Mare?
I have hired lots of folks, and there are people who are really good business analysts as far as research goes. Yet I cannot put them in front of a client, and we have to go in front of clients a lot to get requirements. If you don't come across as someone who has a command for communication, they're sort of going to blow you off, and it happens all the time. And clients can be extremely demanding, and they're looking for that level of showing that you have this level of expertise. That they're looking for that. If you can't cut that, I can't even put you in front of a client. So your career goals are going to be limited. Basically, you are going to be in the backside, and you're going to be handling a lot of research, document analysis. You really need to get to be a very good communicator and to be able to focus on grammar, focus on vocabulary, focus on communicating to different levels of audiences. It's all part and parcel of getting that level of excellence, so we can get you out there and get you a better paying job, better career. I mean, it's motivation. It is definitely, I've said it before, even on the vocabulary show. it is a motivator to learn this stuff, even though it can be boring and dry. Read, read, read. We said that once before, Kathleen, right? Read as much as you can and pay attention to that, how things are being communicated. Don't leave out words. Don't add words. Don't add hyperbole of words that are, just to impress people. All is a form of communication. So focus on the basics, and it'll get you farther in your career.
And that's exactly why it's not okay to just rely on tools. Absolutely a great way to learn grammar, to improve it, and that's an ongoing process. It's not something that you're going to just learn, take a class or read one book and be done with it. It's an ongoing thing all throughout your career, all throughout your life. But a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'm going to use Grammarly, or I'm going to use this tool, or I'm going to just, run it through a tool to check it before I send it out. But it also has to come out in the way that you speak, in the way that you present yourself. And frankly, if your level of grammar and vocabulary and your written material is at one level, but your speech is at a different level, people are going to notice that, and that's going to not sit well with them. And that's going to sow some seeds of distrust, because they're like, well, why are you so articulate on paper but not, or electronic paper, but not in person?
Right.
So you have to make sure that those two are at the same level. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not some wiggle room when you're having a casual conversation, but that also doesn't mean that just because it's a casual conversation you should completely drop all of these things. You want to find a comfortable balance, but certainly when you're dealing with your boss, your coworkers, your clients, you want to make sure that you are presenting yourself in the best possible light. You're presenting your material in the best possible light, and overall you want to be professional. And one of the important ways of doing that is through your vocabulary and your grammar. Am I being too harsh?
Harumph. No.
Okay.
No, we can't drill it home enough. We can't drill it home enough that it is important, even though people poo-poo it. And absolutely what you said, Kathleen, do not rely on the tools. Tools will just get you so far, but when you get in front of an audience, it's going to be really clear that you don't have that education that you need. So, hit the books.
Yep.
It'll get you far.
Use the books, use the classes, use the tools to keep improving, but don't just do it in the written stuff. You've got to make sure it carries across into everything else that you do.
Right. And if you have any questions, just let us know. If you have any problems, we'll definitely help you out in that area. That's what we're here for.
Absolutely. All right, let's just run through my list here, make sure we didn't miss anything. I think we got it all, though.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay.
Good to go?
Yeah, I'm good on my list. You good on yours?
I'm good on mine.
Excellent.
Okay, everybody. That about wraps it up. Yeah, love it when really it is a good thing. And you want to catch us on we're on all the favorite places: Instagram, Periscope, Facebook, YouTube. You can catch this show if you want to watch it again on YouTube once we post it, and catch us next week. And thanks for stopping by. And that's it, I think, for the BA Zone.
Yes, thanks so much, and we will see you soon. Bye.
Hey, take care, everyone. Have a good night.